Welcome to Roundhill Radio. Through our conversations, we discover the holy and the ordinary, look for moments of grace and peace, and redefine what we talk about when we talk about faith. Hey, Ed.
Hey, how you doing, Leslie?
Good. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter. Happy Easter season.
Happy Easter season. 'Tis the season of Easter. So we are looking at week 22 in our 52 for the journey this week, and it is Psalm 24, which is awesome. And so, is this our first psalm? I was thinking.
I think it is. I don't believe we've had one thus far.
Good stuff.
Yep.
So here we go with Psalm 24. The earth is the Lord's and all that is in it, the world and those who live in it. For he has founded it on the seas and established it on the rivers. Who shall ascend the hill of the Lord, and who shall stand in his holy place? Those who have clean hands and pure hearts, who do not lift up their soul to what is false, and do not swear deceitfully. They will receive blessing from the Lord and vindication from the God of their salvation. Such is the company of those who seek him, who seek the face of the God of Jacob. So, Psalm 24. I have many questions that
Yes.
immediately come to mind.
Good.
I feel like oftentimes in scriptures we see something saying the God of Abraham, the God of David, the God of... This
Jacob.
time we're seeing the God of Jacob. Is that should I be knowing something about that when that is said? Does that imply knowledge that I do not have?
Well, I think every time we open up the Bible, it implies knowledge we probably don't have, right? there's always some given or context that is in the background, and we're like, what is that? Or what do we need to know in order to understand this?
Right.
When there are references to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and my sense here is that, sometimes one name is used or all three names are used, but it's always one of the ancestors, one of the great ancestors. And so I get the sense that this is a connection again it's to emphasize continuity. So
Okay.
that the God who was the God of Abraham is still the God of the people for those who are, who've created Psalm 24. And these Psalms are being written much later than a lot of those stories about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Okay.
Or they are describing a time in the life of Israel, would be a more accurate way to say this, which is considered to be further down the road historically. So it's about continuity. Remembrance is so important to this culture and also to early Christianity. Do this in remembrance of me, do this in remembrance of him. And in a way, this is saying, do these things in remembrance of those who've gone before you. You are part of a great chain of being, and you're still connected with those people, which is I'm not sure we have that sense very much, in our culture today. We've kind of lost that sense of continuity, and maybe we're trying to reclaim it. But I think it is one of the givens in these texts. So that would be my response to the reference of Jacob. And these Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were far from perfect people. And I think that's the other thing to say here is that it's wonderful to remember them, but it's a remembrance of their humanity as well. They were complicated, people who fought within themselves, and Jacob was known really as a great deceiver, interestingly enough. And I think it's funny that he gets mentioned here because one of the conditions of being part of this, the Lord's, the temple and going up to the temple to celebrate the earth as the Lord's, those who have clean hands and pure hearts, who do not lift up their souls to what is false and do not swear deceitfully. But Jacob was not exactly the purest character of them all. And yet he gets mentioned here.
Well, now I got to ask, because as you say, what's the deal with Jacob?
Well, I think the thing about Jacob is not meant to be too far to the forefront of the psalm. It's really what's happening at the front end that's so important.
Right.
And I think that Jacob, again, it's a way of saying that the God who was involved with Jacob, who was far from a perfect person, is still the God who's involved with the people of Israel, and this psalm is reminding them, by the way, that this is the God of the entire earth, right? This is not just the God who's overseeing a nation or a tribe or a region, but the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. Jacob was a little part of that, a little but a very important part of that drama.
Yeah. So we're recording this. Actually, today, the day we're recording this, is Earth Day, is it?
Yes. Yeah.
Which is fun. And so why did you choose this? Because we're celebrating Earth Day in worship, in person and online this week. So is why did this make the cut as the sort of Earth Day reading for you?
I think the thing that really strikes me about this are those first two lines. The earth is the Lord's and all that is in it, the world and those who live in it. So what we emphasized in our questions for this text, if the ownership of the earth belongs to the Lord, that makes us renters, right? We're here by the good graces of the owner. And everything, as it stresses here, all that is in it, the world and those who live in it, are all part of this great, huge enterprise, humankind living on the face of this earth. Yeah. But again, the idea is that we're living with reference to this one who has made it all possible and made it happen. So if we see ourselves as renters rather than owners, how does that change the relationship to everything? What's our responsibility? And when I've moved into apartments in my life, and usually I get a pretty clear idea from the owner about what's expected of me when I move into a space. Right. You don't touch that. You do touch that. If you're going to put anything in the wall, you tell me, and I'll come down and put the nail in for you, and then you hang your painting or whatever. And right. And likewise, if you run into trouble here and you got a problem in the kitchen or the water's, the tap is leaking, come and find me. And I think that it's this collaborative effort when it works well, when you've had a good relationship between the owner and the renter. Many people have had not good relationships, but if you have a good relationship, it works very smoothly and everybody helps everyone else. And I think that's what the vision is here, is this notion that God is the one who's overseeing all of this. By the way, I also wanted to say that at the beginning of this, where it talks about he has founded it on the seas, that is the world, and established it on the rivers, I think in the background of this psalm is something we have talked about before, which is kind of like this ancient tension between God and then what we might call the God of nature, that was very much part of the other peoples who were always living side by side with the people of Israel, who believed in Baal, the storm god, the god of thunder, and so on, Asherah, the god of fertility, and so on. This God is not identified exclusively with nature. It's kind of beyond it in a sense, through it, but beyond it at the same time. There's even a fancy theological word for this, which is called panentheism. Ooh. Pan meaning kind of overall, but the Greek word en meaning in. So somehow in and part of it, but also beyond it and, kind of overseeing all of it. Oh, and that's it. Yeah, that's so. I think that there's a little bit of that going on here in this psalm.
I always find it interesting that so many of these concepts we discuss on this podcast have a lot of these sort of dualities. In and on. And then I think about, how you have explained the Trinity as being like these different expressions of God. I feel like these what feel like initial contradictions that through conversation end up being a more full explanation or like a more rich understanding. You could do a whole sermon series on those, because there's like so much that's like you first look at it and you're like, what? Like, how does that make sense? And then you think about it more and they hold these almost contradictory ideas together. I want to go back to the idea of the renting, because as a former renter myself, I was thinking about the basically the fundamental requirement of a renter is not to mess it up too much.
Do no harm.
Do no harm. Don't go painting the walls. Don't go putting holes. Don't go doing nonsense with the floors,
Yep.
And
Yep.
As renters of planet Earth, I feel like we are not maybe being the best tenants.
We've overstepped our bounds, right? I think that there's this idea that there are some guardrails. And we're meant to operate within a certain zone. I mean, from the very beginning, the word has been go forth, right? Multiply. I mean, tend the garden, make it rich, make it productive. And even Jesus picks that up, where he talks about I'm the vine, you are the branches, and there's pruning that happens because the whole idea is that the community of love that he gathers, it's supposed to grow like a garden is supposed to grow and be productive and nourishing. Be fruitful. That's actually even the word that Jesus uses specifically. And we've gone way beyond that. And it's in the 19th century, Jesuit poet Gerard Manley Hopkins wrote a poem where he talked about everything is, I think the word he uses, smeared with human toil and labor. And it's like the imprint of humankind has gotten on everything. And it has just damaged the environment. So this is a man who's writing when the Industrial Revolution is coming into, talk about, it's full flowering, but in a very negative sort of way. But he does affirm in this, it's called The Grandeur of God, or God's Grandeur is the name of the poem. He affirms at the end of it, he says that there lives the dearest, freshest, deep down things, the Spirit, like he calls it, the Holy Spirit broods over the world. It's still there. It's still part of it, but it's been very compromised in a lot of ways. And that was in the 1800s. So we've gone so much farther down the road since then. I just get the feeling, Leslie, one of the reasons I wanted to include this psalm is if we reclaimed that sense of relationship with the earth, that, we're essentially those entrusted with caring for it, helping it to bring forth its very best, then if we asked that question over every expenditure we make, every decision we make related to the earth, how do I think this is going to affect the earth? We may not be able to eliminate all of the damage, but we certainly could turn the tide. And so that's why I think this renter's image is an interesting one, for this. By the way, this psalm, I was just doing a little bit of background reading on it this morning. It's one of the psalms in the Bible that's called an enthronement psalm. And it's imagining God essentially being enthroned as the king of the world, the leader of the whole world. And so not only does it say, the earth is the Lord's, but guess what? This is his inauguration ceremony. And so he has been established, God has been established as the one, to whom we are accountable in this, right? So it's not only saying that nice thing, I love nature, I love to get out there and I feel God. This is saying, but guess what? It's not just that God is out there. God is really meant to be, the authoritative guide for all of this. And so we can't be enjoying nature in one sense, but then polluting it over here. And I think that's what this psalm is trying to get us to think about. How are we matching up our love of nature with the way we treat nature?
So for those listening, what would be an action or a mind shift change? We talked about that. So we've sort of been talking about that a little bit. But what would be something that if you had people took one thing away from today's conversation, what would it be?
I think it's awareness. I would say the one word would be awareness. When we open up our refrigerator, take a look in there and just take a look at the, what's holding the food. What are the containers? There's plastic and so on. How can we make changes to maybe not eliminate everything we're doing to potentially compromise the natural world, but how could we reduce our footprint? So I guess it's our awareness of our opportunity to live up to our part of the bargain, right?
Mm-hmm.
That would be the big word for me coming out of this. And I think that I remember a pastor that I knew years and years ago. He was a pastor of a church in New York City, and he said, just imagine if everybody had this phrase, "The earth is the Lord's, and everything that is in it," put up somewhere in their house or next to the refrigerator or next to where we put our compost or the garbage or whatever. So we're just constantly aware of that connection and to live that out. And we might, have a lot of questions about that. Some people might say, I don't believe that. I don't think that's true. All right, well, struggle with it a little bit though, challenge yourself to live into what that could mean. So that would be my one suggestion, to just put that awareness over all of the purchases that we make and the actions that we take and see if we can restore some of that holiness to our relationship with the natural world.
I love that. I think that's a perfect place to end. I don't want to muddy it up with any of my crazy tangents. But I really appreciate that. And I kind of, that the earth is the Lord's is such a clarifying statement, because I feel like we have occasionally received comments saying, well, what does caring for the earth have anything to do with being a church?
Absolutely. We have.
And it's really easy to look at. I'm holding, for our audio people, I'm pointing up our journal. You could point right here and be like, actually.
Yeah, I think that is a really good place to start. Yeah. I'm really glad you mentioned that. I think thank you for that connection, because when that question comes up, I think there's an answer for it here.
Right. Yeah. Like, no matter what you believe about when the begotten began, I think we can all say, the earth is the Lord's and all that is in it is pretty crystal clear.
And if I could just tack a quick line onto that, there's a beautiful older hymn that I know people in our congregation love to sing, and I think you're going to have us sing it here pretty soon. Is "This is my Father's world." Mm-hmm. And I think if people just stopped for a second, if they don't like the way that the earth is the Lord's and all that is in it sounds, "This is my Father's world" means it's not mine. Mm-hmm. So it's saying the same thing, but set to music, to beautiful music. And it's just another reminder. So for anyone who's saying, I don't get it, I don't know why we're paying any attention to this, I would say because all of these voices from the past are saying this to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? They've been reminding us for literally hundreds and hundreds of years. So a little awareness wouldn't be such a bad thing.
Yeah, it's rather unequivocal, some would say. It's
I think so. Straight up.
I've been learning about different marketing concepts, and I've heard about this rule of 7. Have you heard about this? This is new. I'm taking a tangent. I'm taking back everything I just said about ending the episode, and now I'm just going. But there's this rule of 7s that if you want anyone to kind of buy into what you're doing, no matter if it's a soul thing, they have to basically see it 7 times.
Yes,
and there's actually a thing now that they're saying, no, in today's culture, it's more like 12.
Oh, wow.
With our measly attention span and how much is constantly being... It's a combination of our attention spans and how much is being thrown at us constantly, like how much marketing we interact with or absorb every hour, basically.
Sure.
And I just think that's interesting of okay, well, how many times should we say the earth is the Lord's on there to really get it into my thick skull, and then all of our friends to make sure we're this is why Round Hill Community Church is committed to being a force for good, and that force for good logo that is on your sweatshirt right now has a beautiful plant, growing up through the slightly concretey text.
Force for good. Yeah.
Force for good.
Yeah. Well, we got to say it as many times as we can then.
There you go. I like it. I like it a lot. Well, I will actually end the episode here. This has been such a wonderful conversation. So much of it's going to stick with me this week, and I look forward to our Earth Day celebration on Sunday, both in person and online. And I thank you guys so much for joining us. Round Toe Radio is brought to you by the friends and members of Round Toe Community Church. For more information, please visit roundtoeradio.org.
If you enjoyed this podcast, there are a few things that you can do that would make a big difference to us. Like the video, subscribe if you aren't, and click the notification bell and select all. Thank you.